Good morning, everyone. You're welcome to have a seat if you'd like. My name is Tim Riley. I'm the Director and Chief Curator here at America's National Churchill Museum. And it's our honor to host this ceremony of remembrance for those who made the ultimate sacrifice 20 years ago this day. Our ceremony will be a brief one. It will be live streamed, so welcome very much to those who are tuning in throughout the world. We have many special guests with us, including some of our brave first responders from the city of Fulton. We'll acknowledge you later in the program. I do, however, want to also acknowledge a brave group that is not yet with us, the City of Fulton Fire Department. Captain Todd Gray was going to participate in the program, but he is doing his job. I got a call from the fire chief earlier this morning. They have 2 calls right now, and they're out on call. So if they show up a little bit late, they will certainly have our gratitude and forgiveness. I'm very pleased to open the program today with the President and Chief Transformation Officer of Westminster College, an alumnus and an eyewitness to what happened in New York City 20 years ago today. President Don Lofe.
Thank you, Tim, for your warm welcome introduction. And as Tim mentioned, I'm Don Lofe. I'm the president of the college. And I also want to welcome and thank you to our guests for joining us today on this very solemn occasion. Also want to personally welcome all of our local, regional, county, and state responders. Thank you very much for being here. It's our honor to have you here today. I also want to welcome Brooke Thompson, a Westminster senior in the United States ROTC Cadet, Reverend Kiva Nice-Webb, our chaplain and director of Westminster Center for Faith and Service, trumpet soloist David Myers will be performing at the end of the ceremony, and finally my wife Lorraine, who's also with us today. And welcome to those from our Westminster and local communities, and to those of you joining from all over the country on live stream. Each year, on the anniversary of 9/11, our nation pauses to remember all of those who lost their lives suddenly and tragically with no prior warning. On the occasion of the 20th anniversary of September 11th attacks at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, United Airlines Flight 93, we at Westminster College and America's National Churchill Museum honor the nearly 300 lives lost on this tragic day, a day I personally will never forget. I was a senior executive with CNA Financial Corporation, a very large insurance company, working that day in Midtown Manhattan at our New York offices. My colleagues and I were concentrating on the execution of a large public financial transaction that was to be offered to the public the very next day on the New York Stock Exchange. As the terrible events unfolded, my colleagues and I watched in utter belief from the ground and the windows of our office, and then on television from those same offices for most of the day. When then we learned, as all of us did, of the equally tragic attack on the Pentagon and the plane crash in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The experience was not only surreal, but unbelievable for all of us. Each day after, while in the city, we watched fighter jets routinely flying above firefighters, police officers, and other responders that continued to arrive throughout these several days after the tragic event. They were the only traffic on the streets of New York in virtually an empty city that we anxiously waited to be able to leave. And to our own collective relief, we were finally able to get out 3 days later. Now I tell you this story not to make it about me, but to emphasize the point about this significant day in history. Each of us old enough to remember September 11, 2001, has a story about where we were and what we were doing that day. Our first responders, our firefighters in particular, recall in detail the impact of 9/11 on their own lives and careers. Today, we remember the noble sacrifice of those who lost their lives while saving others. We honor our first responders here today who willingly face danger for our safety and are often unrecognized for their service. And today we also honor our military as well for the very same reasons. And we think about why we are gathered here at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, in this particular church, which is a memorial to Winston Churchill's Iron Curtain speech. It is a symbol of freedom and a place where leaders that are world leaders regularly speak and wrestle with the difficult topics such as national security. It is said there is a sign somewhere in the CIA offices in Langley, Virginia, where it is written, "Every day is September 12th." Now, what does that mean? It means after 9/11, nothing would ever be the same. Our security studies program that began in the years following 9/11 is a testament to that fact. Prestigious internships and careers at the highest levels of national security have had their origins here at Westminster College as a result of the tragedy of 9/11. Our securities program and our history here at Westminster teaches that we must remember and honor the past. So today, we honor and remember all the individuals' families, and especially the first responders and those in the military who put their lives in jeopardy for the sake of others. And today we will pause at 8:46 a.m., the exact moment when American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center and changed our lives forever. Thank you for being with us today. It's our honor. Tim?
Again, we were hoping to have Captain Todd Gray with us from the Fulton Fire Department, but he is doing his job. So we've asked Steve Terrell to do a short reading today. Steve Terrell is the Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operational Officer here at Westminster College.
Good morning. I'd like to share with you the story of Captain Patrick Brown, who's called Patty by his family and friends. Before joining Ladder 3 Company of the New York Fire Department, he served 2 tours of duty in Vietnam and was a decorated Marine Sergeant. On September 11, 2001, Captain Brown was in the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Radios were not working. For firefighters engaged in an alarm, communication to your command post is critically important. When Captain Brown was unable to make radio contact, he managed to find a working telephone on the 35th floor. He called 911, knowing the dispatcher would make sure they knew where he was and what his men were doing. I'd like to read the all too brief transcript from that call. Captain Brown: "Dispatch, Captain Brown, Ladder 3. I'm at the World Trade Center. I'm on the 35th floor, okay? Dispatch, okay. Just relayed to the command post, we're trying to get up. There are numerous civilians in all stairwells. Numerous burn injuries are coming down. I'm trying to send them down first. Apparently it's above the 75th floor. I don't know if they got there yet, okay? Dispatch, okay. Captain Brown: "This is 3 truck, and we're still heading up, all right? Dispatch, all right." Captain Brown: "Thank you." Captain Brown made sure those in harm's way went down. 99% of the people on floors below the impact managed to evacuate safely. Captain Brown went up. He made the ultimate sacrifice. To Patty Brown, the 342 other firefighters, and many law enforcement personnel and other first responders who went up so that others could get down, we remember. And we thank you.
And on cue, I think we've been joined by Fulton's finest. Thank you for your service, and thank you for responding this morning. We're glad you're with us. At 8:46 a.m. Eastern Time, 20 years ago, a commercial airliner struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. At that moment, a chain of events began that is still playing out to this day. Today, 20 years later, we acknowledge and remember that moment. And we will chime shortly the bells of this magnificent church of St. Mary the Virgin, Aldermanbury, itself a victim of brutal attacks This church, after all, was destroyed in the Great Fire of London in 1666. It was rebuilt. It was destroyed again in the Blitz of World War II by the German Luftwaffe, who dropped 20,000 incendiary bombs down over London, destroying or at least gutting this church. It was rebuilt here at Westminster College over 50 years ago as a symbol of freedom and as a symbol of resilience. We recognize this wonderful building and all it stands for today and every day. And as we strike the bells today, in a few moments, we strike the pattern of the 4 5s. The sound of that bells holds a special significance for firefighters. Historically, the toll of a bell summoned members to the station, signaled the beginning of a shift, notified departments of a call for help, and indicated a call was completed and that the unit had returned to the station. Departments also sounded a series of bells when a firefighter died in the line of duty. Alert members that a comrade had fallen and made the ultimate sacrifice. One of the most meaningful series of bells is commonly known as the striking of the 4 5s. The fire service is rich with ceremony, custom, and tradition. And today, we honor that tradition. So now, at 8:46 a.m., 20 years ago, marking the moment when the plane struck the tower, we signal the 4 5s. What you will hear is a large bell of Aldermanbury ringing 5 times, with a slight pause, 4 times consecutive. So let's pause and reflect and remember as we listen to the bells strike the 4 5s at this hour, 8:46. And now I would like to welcome Westminster College Senior Cadet Brooke Thompson.
Good morning. My name is Brooke Thompson, and I'm honored to be with you all on this solemn occasion. Today is a time for remembrance and commemoration, both for those affected by September 11th and for the benefits of freedom we enjoy now with even greater gratitude. 19 years ago, just before the first anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, columnist William Safire wrote that then New York Governor George Pataki and others planned to recite Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address at services commemorating September 11th. We should listen to Lincoln's words of so long ago, Safire wrote, because now, as then, a national spirit rose from the ashes of destruction. 2 decades later, we can aspire to that same spirit. And so I would like to share with you here President Lincoln's words, and I acknowledge that this is not only a house of worship, but also a home to Churchill, who I hope would approve. Please listen and take to heart its expressions of dedication to our nation's principles and its resolve that our response to tragedy will lead to a recommitment to the values of freedom for which our nation stands. And please join me in remembering all of those who gave their last full measure of devotion 20 years ago today, and in the 20 years since who perished so that we could be free. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that this nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from those honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Thank you, Brooke. As we continue to reflect and do so in the shadow of this magnificent pulpit, I'd like to tell you a little bit about it now. This pulpit was built in the 17th century. While centuries old, it has a new meaning. The pulpit survived the Blitz of World War II in London. It was, unlike this church, not destroyed. In 2002, 19 years ago, the Diocese of London gifted this pulpit, this magnificent eyewitness to history, to America's National Churchill Museum at Westminster College. And they did so specifically to honor the memory of those who perished on 9/11. It stands with us every day of the year as a reminder of the tragic events and the reminder that together, nations like the United States and Great Britain can work together to preserve the freedoms we all enjoy. In a few moments, you'll hear David Myers play taps from that pulpit. For those of us of a certain age, we remember where we were on September 11th, 2001. I was working for my alma mater, a college very similar to this one, at the library to meet a gentleman who, through his generosity, had enabled us to renovate and modernize the building. I heard of the first plane hitting the World Trade Center. walked over to the nearest television, and watched in disbelieving shock as the tragedy multiplied and cascaded to its horrific end. The moment was bewildering, senseless, tragic. Members of the community gathered in silence that morning and again in the following days, numb with shock, but knowing that it was time for us to stand together. As we gather here, 2 decades later, we are still bewildered, still numb as we recall that day. And as we begin this academic year, a new generation also gathers. It is a generation of young citizens who, from birth until recently, had never known a moment when the United States was not at war. A war on terror that began 20 years ago in New York, Washington, and in the airspace above Somerset County, Pennsylvania, where hijacked commercial airliners so violently struck this nation. In stark contrast, a dozen days ago, the last American military aircraft took flight from the airport in Kabul, ending a mission that carried the last American servicemen and women, together with thousands of Afghans, from that war zone. On August 30th, U.S. Central Commander and Marine Corps General Kenneth McKenzie announced the completion of our withdrawal and, quote, the end of a nearly 20-year mission that began in Afghanistan shortly after September 11th, 2001. Many of us here probably has also dreaded this day, wondering if the United States would experience another act of terrorism, a continued and constant threat for which vigilance is still very much required. But on this day, we mourn for those who were killed in the terrorist attacks 20 years ago, and their families and loved ones, whose grief is beyond imagining. We mourn and remember, too, those who have died in the service of bringing justice to those who committed such attacks and valiantly prevented further atrocities. Today, we remember and recall with deepening appreciation and gratitude those women and men who have served and are still serving in law enforcement or as first responders, and give of themselves to protect us here in Fulton and beyond. Out of the chaos and confusion of the disaster we commemorate today can emerge stronger and deeper bonds within our community, across the nation, and indeed around the world. We will forever remember what happened 20 years ago and its aftermath, and we will continue to mark this day in some form or fashion for the rest of our lives. September 11th stands as a day to remember with sadness, pride, and no doubt with anger. This brief moment is one of thousands that will take place today, both here and abroad, and one of hundreds being held in communities throughout Missouri and the nation. At Ground Zero in New York, an hour ago, in a moving tribute, the President honored the nearly 3,000 who perished there. So as we stand in solidarity with one another here at Westminster College in Fulton, we should know, too, that we are symbolically standing with millions of others across the land and around the world. Indeed, for all, it is what transpired in the aftermath of September 11th, the sense of vulnerability, the realization that are those who hate America and what it stands for, that offer portents of how the world and our perceptions of and relations to that world have changed. Another consequence of September 11th can perhaps offer a more positive outlook. We have, in moments like this one, come to develop a deeper and more grateful appreciation of democracy, freedom, liberty, and respect for individual rights. And while there is much more to be done, we have also come to learn more about Arab and Muslim worlds and worldviews. To the extent that we bask in uncritical self-absorption with our own country and its tradition and worldview, and to the extent that we possess a kind of unthinking indifference to the rich complexity of the world which we live, we are afforded an opportunity to make amends. We have, in short, we've come to place an even greater value on one of the aims of education, which is to make us informed citizens both of this country and this world so that we can better serve both. So as we remember those who perish on 9/11 and those who have served and sacrificed since, let us learn of the lessons of the past, think critically about the present, and build a better future. As we do so, and in closing, I would like to recall, like Cadet Brooke Thompson, the words of Lincoln, these from his first inaugural address. The mystic chords of memory, stretching from every battlefield, every patriot grave, to every heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature.
Thank you, Tim. My name is Kiva Nice-Webb. I am the chaplain of Westminster College. We've gathered here this morning to remember and honor the lives that were lost 20 years ago in the terrible events of September 11th, 2001. And as we prepare this morning to go from this place, let us gather up what we have heard for a time of blessing. So I invite you, if you are comfortable, to cup your hands together and hold with me all that we have heard this morning, all that this anniversary date means for us and for our world, and we will move into a time of prayer. In special memory of those who lost their lives 20 years ago, I invite us to hold a moment of silence together. And join me in a moment of prayer. Holy One, source of life, we ask for blessing upon the human lives remembered here today. Blessing for the families and friends that grieve this 20-year anniversary date. Blessing for our country and for our world. We remember those whose innocent lives were taken. May we hold their memory as sacred. We remember those who struggled to prevent more disaster. May we be inspired by their courage. We remember the first responders, those who died doing their job, and those who bear the scars in their health. May we honor their memory in word and deed. We remember the families and the friends, the co-workers, the neighbors, all of those for whom this day is personal as well as national tragedy. May they be comforted in their grief. We remember everyone impacted by the ripple of events following 9/11, the lives lost in war and conflict and hate in these years since that day. May we never grow numb to the preciousness of life and to the true costs of war. And may we all be strengthened in our resolve to not become the hate that we deplore, but to honor the lives lost on this tragic date through a renewed commitment to our neighbors and to our world. May we live our lives in such a way that those lost on this tragic day are honored by our living. May we seek the things that make for lasting peace. We ask this in the name of all that is holy and all that is good. Amen. I invite David Myers to the pulpit.
This concludes today's ceremony. Thank you very much, and go forth today and remember what happened 20 years ago.